Welcome to this episode featuring Angela Liard, Creative Director at Area, the office design and fit-out specialists. With over 25 years of experience in workplace consultancy and design across UK, Europe and the US regions, Angela has played a key role in space planning and office design on numerous extensive projects. From her time at Sheppard Robson, where she collaborated with leading brands such as JP Morgan, BP and the Royal Bank of Scotland, to more recently her work at Area, where she's been pivotal in developing workspace concepts for clients including Barclays Rise, Fisher Investments, the Alan Turing Institute, Infosys and the London
Port London Authority.
I'll say that again. And the London Port Authority. And many more. That's quite a list, Angela.
It's a big list, yeah. I've been working for a while.
Thank you very much for joining this episode. We're really delighted to have you.
Thank you.
And I guess, first of all, just kicking off, can you tell us what it was like coming into the industry, coming over to the UK, and then I suppose the second question is the transition from Sheppard Robson to Area.
Yeah. So I guess I grew up in Australia. I studied architecture and town planning and interior design. I quite like to learn, so I was at uni for quite a while, kept doing different things. But yeah, so the main reason for me coming here, people always ask, how on earth did you end up here and why are you still here? Growing up in Oz, it's the most beautiful place in the world, but you are so removed from the rest of the world. And, you know, such a big country and there's so much to see there, but all the idea of the history and the architecture and the wealth of all that is on the other side of the world, that was the draw. It was the draw to kind of come over and see all that other stuff you'd only ever seen, you know, in pictures or in film or, you know, on screen.
Yes.
And that was it. That was me, you know, we were studying at university and really just wanted to see a lot of these places in real life. And that's kind of what brought me here initially, thinking I'd come over here for a couple of years, work for a bit, travel a bit,
and go back
and
home.
go home. I never did. Yeah. So obviously I'd, you know, had experience of working in the industry back in Australia, but the bulk of that has actually been working here in the UK, with clients obviously across Europe and the States and around the place. So it's that was really it. It was a sense of adventure, I guess, that brought me here, and a sense to continue learning around architecture and design and
That's
the
brilliant.
Beautiful spaces.
I love it. And then moving from Sheppard Robson to Area, that must have been quite a transition.
It really was. I mean, you know, the consultancy business, as funny enough, when you worked in it, it was never really called consultancy. It was only when I moved to D&B that's what they called, you know, the type of companies like, you know, Sheppard Robson. It's a very different way of working, definitely. You know, you sort of work with very different people. I mean, if you work in consultancy, it's very much purely design and architecture within the team and the work that you do. And then you work with external consultants, you know, mechanical, electrical engineers, you know, all that kind of stuff. But what I've seen as a real benefit moving across to D&B is the fact that is all under one roof. It's so much more fast-paced and immediate, and you can kind of design with all that in mind, so it becomes quite more kind of holistic and coordinated much quicker. And I quite like that. I like kind of working in a collaborative way rather than coming up with a beautiful design and then giving it to someone else who then has to try and make it work. So the fact that you can do that all in-house, I really enjoy. I quite like the fast pace of it. I have access to work on multiple projects at a time. They're quicker, you know, you're kind of moving from one job to another. So you've got access to more clients and more people and different styles of work, rather than some of the other amazing jobs that I did at Sheppard Robson, like, you know, JP Morgan and BP. But those projects were kind of took years to kind of from start to finish. So quite often you're wholly engrossed in one particular client, and in itself is an amazing opportunity. But sometimes you do feel like it's when's the next thing happening? I've loved this. I want to do more and different. So working in D&B gives you access to more people and more design options, and more opportunities to flex the design muscle a bit more and more frequently.
And then see it through.
Exactly. So it just feels it's a much more kind of holistic approach, which really suits me. It doesn't suit everybody. I know people who've tried both and have gone back to consultancy, but for me it works. So
no, that's great.
Yeah.
And so that's quite you've experienced a consultancy or the trad, you've experienced a DMB and across all those projects, which is great. What's like one overarching purpose for a project that really helps to ensure that project is a success?
The client will always come to you for a reason as to why they need to do the job. Is that kind of what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have they got that reason?
Usually, yeah. I mean, the reasons will always be different. Or not always be different, but I think there's always a reason why a client approaches you, wanting you to look at their current space or a new space, and that brief is different for every client. But it could be a lease end on the space they're in, so they're looking for somewhere new. They might need more space. They might need less space, and I think drilling down into the reasons why they're looking for something. It's always a new space. It can be a refurbishment of an existing space, and I think you kind of find over the last few years, the dreaded C word, COVID, as I'm sure a lot of people have told you already, that has really changed people's perceptions on workspace, and where your workspace is, and what you need from a workspace, particularly given that we were all locked up in a corner of a bedroom on a tiny desk or a kitchen table for however long, and or people who had the benefit of a home office where it was really quite comfortable and quite lovely.
Yeah.
So it's actually looking at a lot of businesses are now looking at how they reuse their existing space, reconfigure their existing space to suit this kind of new mindset of what people consider a workspace to be or an office space to be.
Yeah.
So, and that is really what we're finding. Clients are coming to us because they need to rethink how their workspace is.
Yeah. You mentioned something interesting about what the office is for.
Yeah.
What is the office for?
I think now, it always has been to a point, but the office I think is for coming together and collaborating. Is that word that everybody uses, collaborating, but it kind of is. Certainly in our industry, I think I certainly work a lot better if I'm in the room with the people that I'm working with and creating a design for, costing, programming, all that kind of stuff. And it's so much easier and so much quicker and efficient a lot of the time if you're all in the room at one time. I mean, I have a perfect example of where it was actually during COVID, but we had come into the office, a smaller team and all 2 meters apart, shouting across the room. But we had this really quick, a client request or something and a really quick turnaround. But we had everyone in the room that we needed. We had the technical designers, the cost consultants, the M&E design team, who were able to kind of throw it all out on the table and come up with a solution really quickly. And that would have taken hours or days if you had to set up a Teams call and dial someone in or whatever. So those instances where collaboration and actual physical in the room collaboration is so, for me, really important. On the other hand, I think tech plays an important role to that collaboration piece. Because, the kind of hybrid working model that most businesses are adopting in some form or another really only works properly if you've got tech that supports that, if you've got people dialing in. So there's a huge piece around technology to make sure that works. But in terms of what the office is for, it's can provide a bit of a support network. It provides a bit of it's a destination place, particularly for the business, for that reason, for people to collaborate. Even if you just need to print out drawings and plans and stuff, and I haven't got an A1 plotter at home, so it's those sort of bits and pieces that are more kind of business led. But yeah, I mean, the office is for a place for people to kind of throw ideas around and, get things done. And there's different ways to do that,
Yeah, no, I'm sure. I guess it's kind of the company's values and culture must play into the purpose of them having an office. Because if someone wants to be innovative, they need an office so people can innovate. And if someone wants to be collaborative, they need to have an office so people can collaborate.
Yeah, exactly.
So is there quite a big piece around that, like unpicking what someone's purpose really is, or do they generally quite clear about that and they understand that?
I think sometimes clients aren't quite sure what they need their office to do. They don't know how they need it to work anymore because it's so different to the perception of what we did 5 years ago to, what we do now after the last few years. It's kind of considering that's not coming out very well. It's just kind of reimagining or rethinking about actually what do I need my office space to do? What do I need in my office? And what sort of functions or facilities do I need in the space? But I wasn't trying to thought of it. It's sorry.
I was just going to come in with, we can just edit that out. I can just come in with another, because what you're saying is so right that people might not understand actually what their problems are, and they might move office once every 5 years at max, whereas you're dealing with 5 offices every week. And so your sort of consultancy and understanding what they need to understand, and then unpacking that and pulling it out from them, the sort of consultancy side of you, bringing that out and building a brief, building a purpose that's deeper than just bringing people back into the office, but a real deep, meaningful purpose that can then lead the design.
Definitely. I think you need to try and drill down into that with the client and figure out exactly, what's their main purpose, what's their main drive for needing to move or redesign or rethink how their current space works. And a lot of that, like I say, has come out from the fact that people have managed fine working remotely, and the business seems to, and some businesses don't. But it's if they're keen to get people back into the office, it's then, right, what do we need to provide in the office space that's either different to what people have got at home, or just enables, or is the real pull to get people back into the office if that's the business model, that people really need to be in the office rather than working remotely. And you'll find it also depends on the demographic of the business and the employees, because you might have all the kind of younger sort of 20-somethings who are in a flat share and have all been like fighting for broadband and around a kitchen table, trying to do Teams calls when everyone's trying to do the same thing, versus someone who does have a nice home office and a good setup and is quite happily staying at home because they've got everything that they need. So I think you kind of find that providing that space, it's almost like getting the sort of younger generation, or those people who are in those kind of slightly more compromised work situations at home, giving them the space in the office to make things work. And then the other end of the spectrum is those people who are more than happy to work from home, is what's the pull to get them back into the office. And so there's two very different, the brief is very different, even just across the workforce, sometimes just within one company. So it's really quite interesting drilling down into that. Some clients will come to you with a fairly detailed brief, and that could be based on some workplace strategy piece they've done already. They could have done it in-house, or they could have used a workplace strategy team to do that. Or it could be someone who has got grand aspirations and plans, and they know they've got a massive growth trajectory coming up. They know they're going to need more space, but they don't necessarily need it right now. So it's a bit like, what do I do with all this space that I'm taking but I don't need? How do I make it work? How do I make it flexible enough so so we're not swimming in space, so we haven't got 3 desks in a massive room or whatever. So it's the brief is always different from every client, and it's actually just trying to establish the reasons why they're doing what they're doing, and actually sort of trying to help you guiding them a lot of the time as well. Having worked with multiple clients, multiple office spaces, multiple briefs, you do draw on that experience across different sectors. And maybe a like-minded business, what they've done, what they provide. If you've got a client who doesn't really quite know, they know they've got their grand 5-10 year plan, but they don't kind of quite know. They know they're likely to get there based on how the business is going now, but actually, what do they do to get themselves there, and to be most sensible with the real estate that they're taking or the space that they're using?
Yeah.
So it's trying to draw that out of people. Is a great part of what we do, and I love that. I like being able to kind of go try and delve deep into it and get inside their heads and their kind of the DNA of the business, and try and figure out what it is that they want and what they need, because what they want might not be what they need, and vice versa. So
100%. I think that's a big deal.
It's a really big deal. Just getting it right is really important. So the more engagement you have with a client at the front end, you'll get to your solution quicker. But I think it's a much more successful job if you've been able to kind of come to that solution together with your client, as well as you providing the expertise.
Why do companies want to bring people back to the office? Why? What's the purpose?
I think there are some companies that are, that their business case is they're remote first, which is quite interesting. I'd find that awful personally. I mean, I'm a people person. I like being around. I like being in a space that I'm, surrounded by people. I like the immediate engagement and the conversations and where things lead, and the camaraderie that comes with being in the office space. I really enjoy that. Some businesses, that's just not their MO. But I don't know. I think it's just the innate sense that people like being with people. We're a social bunch, aren't we? So I think it's everyone. No one's an island, really. And they leave that to the whole. It takes a village to raise a child. It takes it's that whole kind of concept of community.
Yes.
And I think that is really kind of what an office is. It's a community. Yeah. And I think most people probably work better when they're around like-minded people who have a similar vision or desire to get to a final point, or to learn while doing that.
I do. I personally feel that brands, companies struggle to get their team and staff bought into the brand vision and the experience and the culture, and also the impact on well-being and physical health and mental health, and all of these points that are really important. And as companies, we should be taking seriously and taking responsibility for it. And unless we are bringing them into the office where we can actually support them in that way, we're not going to let them flourish and become the best version of themselves, essentially. But then I do think we need to be very mindful for people that may be neurodivergent and they are more introvert and they prefer to be in their own setup at home, right? Or wheelchair access isn't great on the journey to work. And it's really important that we consider all of those aspects, which really comes on to my next question, really. The place, where's the location? You've dealt with quite a few different regions, which actually makes this a really interesting question for you. But is there a perfect location for an office?
I'm on a beach somewhere. I don't know. Hawaii. Hawaii. I've never been there. It's always on my list. I think if you're talking in terms of a successful workspace, I think the perfect place is something that is, I guess we're talking about an office because that's what we do. Something that is, I say, easily commutable. I guess. And that doesn't necessarily need to be you get there in 15 minutes, but it means that, you're not frazzled and, kind of apart from your usual train dramas and what have you. But if it's sort of an easy, comfortable route into the office, then that's always a bit of a bonus. I think a lot of companies, I think I kind of mentioned earlier before we started chatting about some of the survey work that we do with clients if they're looking for a new space, but they're keen for staff retention on the current clients, the current staff that they've got. Things like kind of postcode mapping, getting an idea where their workforce currently live can actually have, is a really useful tool when you're looking for a new space, because if that changes someone's commute, that could be a real red flag for some people. It's like, well, I'm not going to add an extra half an hour and out to my journey to get to work every day. I'll look for somewhere else. So I think being able to get to the office fairly easily is pretty important. I think local facilities, somewhere that has supporting facilities around you, I don't know whether that's, going out to grab lunch or go to the post office or you can go to the pub after work or go and see a movie or whatever. I think an office space that isn't remote, although the other end of the spectrum, if you've got somewhere that is in a regional business park, then generally you'll have either facilities on site, or actually within the office space you create those facilities, so people have got somewhere to grab lunch and somewhere to get coffee and all that sort of stuff. Concierge services, which might be handy if you need to do your dry cleaning but you can't drop down the road and do it. So I think just kind of having those support services around you. I read an interesting article not that long ago. I think it was a Gensler report about how it was in America, so it might have been slightly different, but how a lot of companies actually aren't moving into the central business districts anymore. They're going a bit more suburban and going into business because you have a lot of those facilities around you. Like you might have, the shopping mall or the cinema complex or whatever, and office spaces there was a draw for a number of businesses to be a little bit more kind of suburban in their approach. But you can still do that here. But it was quite interesting. And again, I guess maybe being in America with a bit more space, a bit like Oz, I suppose. They'd have that I found was quite interesting. But I think, the perfect office space is something that's easy to get to. You've got stuff around you that you can access. It isn't necessarily work related. And I think, access to natural space, like, outdoor space or the ability to be able to go outside. Key, green space, which is, obviously at a premium in central London, but, a roof terrace or, something like that, which we're lucky to have at our office. We've got a roof terrace.
Is that not why you took the space?
One of the reasons, and the pubs. I think we've got like 7 pubs we can get to without getting wet.
Oh, really?
Yeah, something like that.
That's great.
I think our MD paced them out.
He's a very wise man.
Very wise man. Yeah, exactly. So we've got great facilities nearby and a good office. Yeah.
I do think that changes that whether someone firstly goes into the office, and secondly, if they do go into the office, how they feel when they arrive.
Yeah.
The journey, the contextual design, like everything around about them in the environment, and the facilities, whether it's a hairdresser, dry cleaner, the gym, the restaurants, the post office. Like there's so much that we do in and around our day because we're not sitting at home waiting for parcels. It's probably the biggest thing, isn't it? People going to get parcels delivered to work. And because that someone's going to be there all day long, right?
Yeah.
How can your clients essentially find an office that will enable their people to be the best version of themselves? And is there any, like you do the postcode mapping to see where people come, can we enlarge that out and include facilities and what sort of facilities people want and what sort of facilities people use?
I think, and again, a part of that sort of front end kind of workplace assessment piece, simple things like survey monkeys, they're so easy to set up. We do them quite a lot, even just internally. We'll get something sent out, what do you think about this, blah blah blah, and it could be about bringing in an extra service or I don't know, anything, SurveyMonkey's even about anything, but they're quite useful because you can. The way you word them have to be really careful.
Yeah, to count as qualified data.
Yeah, no, exactly. So, you could ask, the office and get however many responses. But yeah, so that's always quite good. I mean, you'll always get someone say, I want a swimming pool on site or something, something that's generally not in the norm, the mainstream, and unlikely to happen unless you work at a gym or something. But I think that's always asking people what they want is always useful. You take that information with a pinch of salt. You qualify it a bit, but if there's some similarity across some of the responses that you get, that can help start to build a bit of a picture about what your staff want or what they need. What would draw them into the office.
Yeah,
I mean that's the best way to do it. I mean you can. I think it's always really useful to ask the workforce. Quite often you'll have, or you might have senior management who'll make the call. And they're like, well, I think we need X, Y, and Z, but that's not necessarily what everyone who comes into the office every day needs or wants. But yeah, I think you qualify it by asking the people who are going to work there. What's going to get you back in.
Yeah, that's really valuable. It's more than just the office. It's asking the people what they need around. I think it's nice.
Yeah, and we spend so much time. Most of our life, we spend most of our time working, don't we? Yeah. I mean, that's the unfortunate reality of it all. It's
crazy,
most of us have to work to earn a living to be able to work to earn a living. So it's just making sure that you've got a nice experience when you come to the office. So you can do what you need to do when you come to the office. You can have a chat with your workmate you haven't seen for a while, go grab a coffee or have some lunch or whatever, but it needs to work, and I think the social aspect of the office is so important.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
And Area, you're actually B Corp, aren't you?
We are. We just had our 1 year anniversary this week, I think. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
I mean, I think actually a lot of people don't know what that means, and the whole sort of triple profit and the sort of planet and the people and that.
Yeah.
I think it's actually people at B Corp and might not actually appreciate how deep that is and how holistic that is.
It is, yeah. It's not just about sustainability, but it's about the kind of social aspect as well. So being socially responsible as well as being sustainable, and that it's within the DNA of the business, and there's nothing bad or unusual about wanting to be socially responsible and sustainable. So it's super close to the business's heart. Obviously, it took us a while to get there. We were the first D&B company to get it.
Oh wow! Congratulations!
Very exciting. Well, shout about the rooftops about that one. Yeah. We were the first ones to get it. Followed quite quickly along by a couple of others, but yeah, we got there first. And I think it's just at the core of everything that we should be doing. I mean, the construction industry, by default, is pretty bad on the environment.
Well, just as
just by default in terms of building stuff and the materials we use to make the spaces and build the spaces. So just looking at materials and products and suppliers, the supply chain that we use, everything is very much aligned with making sure we're using socially responsible, sustainable business, like-minded businesses, looking at products that are being created and changed and to be more sustainable. Things like carpets with bitumen backings are disappearing, and we're getting recycle backings and things like that. So working with companies that have sustainability at the top of their agenda is what we need to be doing.
So do you have like a certification that you recommend to your clients, or do they choose a certification?
Look, clients are really, are pretty clued up a lot these days. Now, they're aware of things like SCAR and WELL and BREEAM and LEED. Depending on where the business is. And there is, and a lot of the buildings that they're moving into will now have those accreditations aligned with them anyway, because they've been designed and built with sustainability in mind and quality of space. And so quite often you have to design a space that doesn't impact on that, the base build certification that the building's got. Some clients, a lot of clients are asking for those certifications. SCAR is related more to the interior, an interior fit out. BREEAM and LEED are more around the whole building.
Okay.
And then WELL is, there's a number of certifications similar to WELL, which is more about the quality of the space. So as well as the sustainable element, it's around access to natural light and even, access to, food, like the refreshment elements of it, access to fresh air and daylight and sound, all that sort of thing, and being very mindful of creating spaces that are very inclusive. Also around, disability, but you mentioned neurodivergence before. It's quite interesting. People say designing for neurodivergence, designing for this stuff, but actually, if you design for someone who's neurodivergent, you're effectively designing for the whole. You've got everyone covered. It's interesting because people who are neurodivergent could, and then there's so many levels of that spectrum as well. But it's creating spaces that have, you've got quiet spaces, or somewhere where it's even just being able to, or you might need somewhere that's a bit darker and just somewhere to take yourself away from the busyness of an open plan office. So providing those spaces it's interesting to learn and to understand about those type of spaces that people need.
Yeah.
But then designing for that pretty much means you'll go everyone covered.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Great. I was having a conversation with someone about how some people need to see in high contrast.
Yeah.
And now people that don't need to see in high contrast can see fine the high contrast.
Yeah.
And the people that need it can see too. So in designing in high contrast, you are designing for everybody.
Yeah.
There's nobody that suffers. So
it
is much more inclusive. I do think though some of those certifications to get are quite expensive, aren't they?
They are quite expensive.
Does that
some more than others.
To be sustainable,
yeah.
To be sustainable, you're almost being charged. No,
not necessarily. Well, there's a difference. You can actually design with, say, the SCAR principles in mind, without necessarily. A lot of clients want that, but they won't necessarily go for the certification.
Yeah. But
I think as a business, we kind of design that and design our spaces like that anyway, because it's the right thing to do, and it's environmentally and socially conscious. So there are some certifications that once you've got them, you've got them. There's others that you need to be recertified for, and that's where it becomes a bit more expensive. But I think if you design a space with sustainability and social responsibility in mind at the get-go, you'll kind of get that anyway. And there are some that are less expensive than others, and then there's some you can do like early pre-assessments of the scheme at the front end. You can quite easily sort of sanity check where you're going fairly early doors to kind of make sure that you don't go off piece.
Yeah.
But
and what are the ones that are less expensive?
Do
you know them off the top of your head?
Not really. No, I know SCAR's not bad. It's it's a few £1,000s or something. I think I'm kind of making that up. Sorry. It's not overly expensive. I think the ones are a little trickier. Actually, things like this is me just telling you because I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, that's cool.
I know WELL is quite a tricky one to get hold of, and you need to recertify.
Yeah.
So, but there's Fitwell and there's WELL and there's a few others, and some are easier than others.
Yeah.
BREEAM and the LEED, which are more LEED is more America, BREEAM is more UK and Europe, I think. But
to get a WELL, do you need a consultant in house, like a WELL certified?
You can do. We have in-house certifiers as part of the business. We can offer that as a service it's an extra service that the client can then pay for, but we can do that. But like I say, we'll sort of sanity check it to a point anyway across what we're doing. But you don't necessarily have to have a well person. You could go externally. We could bring in, and if we didn't have them in house, we could bring someone in onto the project, and then it's just a fee that the client pays direct to them, or we work with them. But yeah, I don't think they're as prohibitive as either maybe they used to be or they're perceived to be. I think
that's good intelligence for anyone that is looking for a space or is looking to talking to a client right now on a project, that actually exploring some of those options that you've given us, that actually they're not necessarily prohibitively expensive.
No, and like you say, you can design with those principles in mind anyway.
Yeah.
And then if they want to pay for the certification, they can or not.
Yeah, but you kind of get it as a default.
You'll kind of get it as default because I think it's the products we would use would tick those boxes already anyway.
Yeah.
So.
Do you think that there is actually a place in the whole sustainability conversation just for more common sense and like vintage furniture, that type of thing, that was reused? It's not. There's nothing fancy. There's no eco labels. It's just like reusing what we have already and like being sensible.
Yeah, no, definitely that kind of reuse, repurpose.
Yeah, it's not so sexy. It's not so wild. But it just kind of works. Is there a space for that, or do we need certification in today's world to kind of prove that we did the right thing?
No, not so. Things like vintage furniture, for example, is an interesting one because wasn't vintage as such, but it was kind of secondhand sort of furniture. With Barclays Rise, actually, there's a number of pieces that lots of kind of nice, kind of soft, the soft seating settings and stuff like that. A lot of that furniture has either been sourced from secondhand places, antique places. It's a bit sort of mid-century modern kind of feel. So it's that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of dressing that has come from that sort of sourcing. The downside of that from a contractual side of view is you don't get warranties on anything like that. So if someone buys a secondhand piece of furniture, unless it's like a refurbished workstation or task chair or something like that, but those slightly more kind of softer ancillary pieces, you won't always get a warranty on that. So the client has to take that on board, that you're buying it as seen. We're not going to. Quite often they might buy it themselves, and that's fine. So then it's not on us, and from a contractual point of view.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean the idea of reusing, upcycling's a big thing anyway, isn't it? I don't know how many Instagram pages I keep getting sent with people like upcycling furniture. I love watching. I'll sit there. It's like you're into a bit of a black hole.
Trying to find, but it's the amount of time that, I mean, I love vintage furniture. I think it's got so much story to it.
Yeah, definitely.
It's so beautiful from that perspective. But for you as a designer, or any designers out there, the extra time allowance to do vintage over just buying new off the shelf is just crazy. I mean,
there's a definite time investment to it. So, it does take a bit longer.
Yeah, and even if it's a bit cheaper to start with, which there's a conception that vintage furniture is cheap, which is fine. I get that. But actually, once you've built in the research time and any sort of reupholstering that it might need, or
that's it, isn't it?
Painting, anything like that, then you're actually up to sort of potentially new prices.
True. Yeah. Quite even just reupholstering something, and it's more expensive than buying it. It's more expensive than buying a new piece of furniture sometimes, which is a shame. I guess also you need to be mindful of, say boring things, but things like fire code. Sometimes the foam in a sofa might not actually be. It might be a residential product. It might not be commercial grade, and then it doesn't meet fire code, which that becomes a whole other. It's a whole other angle.
Is that actually FR, is that something that you bump up across a lot or not? Because all your supply, like flame retardancy, is that something you bump up across a lot, or is that just a given on all the products that you specify?
Well, we need to be compliant, I suppose, in everything we specify. So if it's a requirement, then we have to pick it up. And you will do, things like acoustics. Obviously, you need to make sure you're ticking the right boxes, the right level of fire rating on things.
Yeah.
I mean, it does come up. I mean, we obviously have to work with building control, who will give us the parameters on some items. Certainly on like wall finishes and things like that. If there's something that you wouldn't normally use on a wall but the client wants to, if it's not tested for that, then we've got to make sure it's tested in its new use. If someone wants to put some carpet on a wall, it's happened. If someone wants to put carpet on a wall, but if it's not tested, then you need to either have it tested or find another way to use it.
Yeah, because if we're reusing and it's not being used in its original intended use, and then we're reusing, we could be crossing lines of boundaries in terms of legislation, and which can actually be really strict, can't they? And
really strict.
I almost sometimes question like how strict they are. Like offsetting against the sustainability of it, the chemicals that are needed to make things
something fire retardant.
Just like, oh my goodness, we tried so hard. And it's just like sort of sprayed in a chemical, like toxic ass. Oh, thanks.
No, thanks.
But it does come up.
Definitely.
It's obviously important, like for any brands that contract, like yourself, dealing with clients. So how do you, at the start of a project, Angela, how do you learn and understand the actual needs of the people that you've then got to go away and design for?
So I guess an example of that is Port of London Authority, which was a job that we did a few years ago. We actually built it during lockdown, so that in itself was interesting. So as a business, Port of London Authority, they're basically in charge of the river, in charge of the Thames. That's kind of their job in terms of all the river traffic and all that kind of stuff. Really interesting as a business. The headquarters are in Gravesend, and the office itself, they'd been there 25 plus years and hadn't really done anything to it. So they were on these massive big, corner core desks. Some people had these 2 metre by 2 metre workstations, and they'd sat at that desk every day for 25 years. So the building was due for a refurb and a sort of an overhaul, and we did a big workplace piece at the front end of it to establish exactly what it was that they wanted from the space for the refurbishment works. There was it had a sort of a pitched roof, and up in the pitched roof was just reams and reams of sort of archived paperwork, hundreds of years old stuff on these like roller racking up in this sort of dingy pitched roof, which they didn't access anymore and didn't certainly need on site. And they were really keen to create space. There was no real social space. Each floor, which was really segmented, had a little teeny tiny tea point, and there wasn't, anywhere for people to kind of gather and have lunch, or, everyone had every single one of them had a kettle and a microwave and a toaster, and it was all very sort of segmented, segregated. So the 360, the workplace piece that the 360 guys did, really drilled down into what they wanted the kind of the new office environment to be. So they were moving away from the big desks. So you could consolidate people across a number of buildings into one space, but that archive space we cleared out and turned into a huge social breakout space, because there were 3 buildings that were kind of connected by this main one with the pitched roof. And it was on the river. It had river views. And I think the other crazy thing was when you first arrived into the building, the reception was completely closed off. You couldn't see the river. You could have been anywhere. But in reality was, as soon as you went into that meeting room, there was a meeting room that you could kind of see the river, but it had big blinds and heavy things. And you were like, right, we need to rethink, make the most of the space, really kind of celebrate the location of the building, but also create this much more modern, open, collaborative headquarters for them, really. So once we kind of developed the brief with them, we actually created a change champions group. So the workplace team that did the front end piece stayed on board the whole way through the design development process, because we pitched the job, we pitched some space plans and test fits and general look and feel and ideas about what we thought we could do to the building to celebrate the river and the location and all that kind of stuff. But really, the design started once we were engaged and once we were successful in winning the project. So the change champions, which were different members of the business from different parts of the business. If you've got people like, I've forgotten the terminology for the name now, but there's the captain of one, because you're dealing with river pilots and all sorts of interesting people who work on the river, who might be in the building not that much, or because they're out on the river on boats and things, down to the HR and finance and the different and all the kind of facilities teams and everything in between. So it was really quite interesting, and so there were surveys that we did with them to figure out exactly what people wanted. And, some people still, people were clinging onto their big desks and clinging onto their offices, as you would expect if they've worked in that way. But then there were a lot, at the other end of the spectrum, you had, senior management who were really keen to bring on this more modern way of working and create a more collaborative environment for people. So the job itself was great. I mean, the final project was fantastic. The breakout space we did, over the... we obviously knocked out the reception entirely, and knocked out that big boardroom at the back. Yeah. So now you come in and the whole thing is glass. You see the river beyond, meeting rooms around that, and breakout space. There's a little terrace out the back. We built a new terrace off the breakout space as well. So they've got these double external outdoor spaces that are on the river, and it totally transformed the way they use that space. But as part of the job, it did. It not say snowball, but there was lots of things that came off the back of that. The building, the age of it was, there was a lot of extra mechanical and electrical upgrades to make it more sustainable and efficient. We put solar panels on the pitched roof, so they were really keen that it became a very kind of environmentally responsible building as well. So it was a really, really good process, because the client was so engaged at the front end of establishing exactly what it was that they wanted from this kind of new shiny refurbished space that they had, and super engaged. It was great. It was a really, really good example of that kind of client designer engagement to get them to a space that they really, really love.
Yeah, because the change management, that kind of blows my mind. Like from 25 years.
Yeah.
The culture shift, and the change management piece that you say 360 did.
Yeah.
That must have been so intense, and pre, during and post the project. Have they been engaged since the project's been delivered at all, and like the client satisfaction?
We do those. Yeah, we do like almost like a post-occupancy surveys and stuff, and they've all come out really well.
So how do people, or do you know how people have changed, or how they feel and engage with that space compared to what they used to? Do you have any data of that or not?
I'm sure we probably do.
Yeah.
I know, but I mean, you get sort of organic feedback from people because you do go back and we've done some extra stuff for them in some of the other buildings. So you engage with people that worked on the project. They're still there. Some of them have left. Some have retired and stuff. So you don't really see them, but they're still kind of around. You chat to them every now and again. Yeah. When you've worked with a client for that long, it's kind of quite nice. You build up nice relationships as well.
But the feedback must be so transformational. Like, it must have been so transformational for the people. The feedback must be so positive. Yeah.
I think even the people that were quite resistant have appreciated that actually the environment is so much better than it was before. That I think, I don't think we've had any real kind of negative feedback, unless it was from someone who was negative from the get-go and was steadfast in their desire to not change. Yeah. But most people have embraced it, definitely.
It's very interesting how that must change someone's actual day at work and then their life outside of work, because that's so closely correlated. If you have a good day at work, it totally impacts your evening and your night, right? And how that really helps someone evolve and develop better skills and better mindset and their whole managing their stress and everything. Do you know what I mean? That
Definitely.
space must have...
I think just being able to go somewhere that's not just at your desk to sit there and eat your sandwich. The fact that you're on the river, but there was kind of no way of connecting with it, so, and, on a lovely sunny day, it's beautiful. But when it's rainy, I quite like the river when it's rainy, so it's quite nice. Yeah. But it's a cool space. I wouldn't. It's not like some massive high level design. I mean, it's really lovely and slick, but you wouldn't look at it and think you've kind of, because they were also very keen that it was still a very kind of welcoming, comfortable space for people to be in. Because it is a regional office insofar as it's not in London, it's in Gravesend, and a lot of people who work there live quite locally. I don't think there's a lot of people that, it's not like in London, so people will kind of commute. It's a much more kind of local demographic in terms of the employees.
So you said welcoming and comfortable.
Yeah.
How do you make a space welcoming and comfortable?
I think there has to be a bit of a level of familiarity, because I wouldn't say that anything, certainly in that reception space, it definitely has a wow, because rather than walking into what was like a little airlock vestibule thing to get through reception and then sit against a solid wall on a chair while you waited to be taken to the meeting room. Now you kind of come in, the reception desk is in front of you, it's kind of low, it's round, you can move around it, you can see straight out to the river. So I think that it's a visual connection to nature, but to the outside space. So I think that is that's what makes it really quite familiar, which is nice. But it's I don't think anyone wants to walk into a space and feel uncomfortable or kind of not sure what they're doing. Do you know what I mean? It's sort of you either want to walk in and be wowed and amazed, or walk in and kind of think, I like this is good. These you're on the same wavelength as the people are there. Anyone coming into the space is going to be fairly like-minded, I think. But there is a broad spectrum of people that work there. I think, welcoming and comfortable. I think beforehand it felt a little bit more, I don't think like you felt, I guess the route into the building was quite convoluted. So just the fact that you can kind of walk up the stairs and walk in and you're there actually means you're much more in the space immediately. And I think that's really kind of what it's about. I don't think anyone wants to feel kind of conflicted or unsure when they come into a space.
No, I agree. We're seeing more and more this whole resi-commercial sort of soft furnishings, kind of finishes and fittings that we kind of associate with homes.
Yeah, definitely.
Coming into the workspace.
Yeah.
And making that home from home and all these sayings we hear. But actually that to take that to the next level and to actually make that a space that draws people and it's really welcoming and you've got that human connection to nature and that whole holistic piece along with the change management, that starts to become really powerful and impact how people think, feel and behave, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think also what's quite interesting is because the people that work there are so like fairly local, quite often they go home for lunch because there was, but now a lot more people are staying in the office and they'll either bring their lunch in or but use this social space to kind of connect with people and do that. So yeah, definitely, it does feel the furnishings are still commercial grade, but comfortable. You're a mixture of armchairs and sofas and cafe style tables, bar stools, and so it's a real mix within that communal space that they've got, and like I say, access to the terrace. So, which is great. Really nice.
It's a bit of bear with me, Lynn. This question is coming out. There's such a variety of people in a workspace now as people live longer, work longer, and all that, and the transformation in the world in terms of technology, the world's getting smaller, people are travelling a lot more, all this type of thing, and much more multicultural, and which is great. It's all really good stuff. But designing for a space, when you're designing for baby boomers or you're designing for Gen Z, is that a thing that you actually design differently for different generations?
There's general kind of profiling around those different is it generations? What's the terminology? What gen are we up to now? There's a new one was mentioned the other day.
Really?
There's another one beyond. Is it Gen Z? There's another one beyond that now. So, goodness.
All I know is I'm a millennial.
Yeah. I'm one beyond that. It's a tricky one. I think definitely because I think you find the sort of younger generation who are used to things being much more immediate. Just in how they use technology and do 15 things at once. Focusing on back of the room. So I'm here with my kids at the minute, but I think it's it can be a tricky one because you'll find there are people who really do want a more kind of quiet, private, what you consider slightly more traditional space to come and do their work. Even so far as the whole kind of hot desking, idea, the fact that people don't have a dedicated desk anymore can really rub people up the wrong way.
Yeah, sure.
And then you kind of find as businesses kind of, as they kind of get used to the space and people sort of settle in, then you might find that it might be find someone who takes a desk and that's their desk and it's fine and won't sit there, that's so-and-so's desk. But I think there is a much more modern way of designing offices these days, which is a lot less cellular, it's a lot more open, it's a lot more flexible and agile, and that is more aligned with how people work these days, because you don't necessarily have to be in the office 5 days a week. So you don't necessarily need to design a space for everybody to be in 5 days a week, because if you're only in 3 days a week, well, that desk can be shared by a couple of people, that sort of thing. So and that changes actually the parameters of the type of spaces that people are looking for, because people I don't have to be in 5 days a week. I don't need 5 days a week, but you have to embrace that sort of flexible nature. That said, I've got a client at the moment who their policy is only 2 days a week in the office, but they have a desk for everybody in the office.
Wow. But
they are, they're a much more kind of traditional mindset in terms of their business. They're a financial institution, I think. The way that they think is, and I don't think they're ever going to, despite the fact that their facilities team are trying really hard to kind of push them down a more kind of modern, flexible, agile route. I think that I think they're American business, and the headquarters are very set in their ways, and no one's really going to change that. So it's interesting. You've got just some businesses more open to it than others. Yeah. And that was very much more aligned with people have their own space, and that's probably a slightly more dealing with the slightly different kind of generational requirements.
Yeah,
senior management, or a lot of them don't have offices anymore.
Did you have an office?
No, I've never had an office. Oh, I lie. I had an office when I was about 22. I did a 6-month placement at a tech college, where I ran courses for women doing non-traditional courses like carpentry and stuff like that. Cool. Yeah, randomly off the back of doing one of the courses myself when I finished uni.
That's so cool.
Did the course, and they were like, "Do you want to run it?" I went, "Yeah, sure, why not?" That was the only time I had an office. Like, I shared it with someone, but I never saw them because they weren't there the day I was. It was very weird.
If having an office makes you feel so detached.
It did. I didn't like it at all because it was, like I say, it was the only time I ever had an office, and I'd end up down in the workshops most of the time because I'd want to see how to use that tool or that machine. So I found then an office is not my thing.
No.
I'm too much of a people person to be locked in an office. But on the other end of the spectrum, I've got a friend of mine who from high school who was a lawyer, and I remember having that conversation of kind of law firms having offices for partners or being in the open plan. And it was one of the firm, not the firm she worked for another firm, had gone effectively open plan across their space, which was a huge move. And she's like, if I worked there, I'd quit. I need my office.
So there is.
Need my office. And there is a shift across different industries. And the legal industry has definitely had a shift from being very cellular to more open, but it's probably a mixture of both. But it's quite interesting. Some firms are still fairly, traditional in their approach, and others are much more flexible.
So your friend that wants their own office, it does. I hope she's listening to this.
Might be.
Does it not answer her need for an office by just having like a focus space or a small meeting room that she can use, or
possibly? Yeah, I should ask her. Actually, I'm not sure what her work situation is now.
Interesting, isn't it?
I'm gonna have to ask her whether her thought process has changed since then. But that was back, I don't know. That was a good few years ago. But so but yeah, I reckon she's probably got an office. She's a partner now, so I reckon she's got an office.
Interesting, though, isn't it? Like how. Because I can totally remember people having their own desks and having an office, and almost it was a stamp of like success in life when you had your own office and you were senior enough to have your own office, and it was a glass thing, and people looked at you like animals in a zoo because it's just all the people sat here, and then the sort of directors sat in their glass offices, right? And
definitely.
Now, the thought of that is just like completely turned on its head. And the impact that's had on senior people being more connected and the people being more able to learn and develop and grow by hearing those conversations from senior people.
It's that kind of, when I read the terminology, it was something like organic eavesdropping or something. The idea of the, younger or, less experienced staff actually just organically learning from more experienced staff because they're out in the office rather than hidden behind a glass wall. It was quite interesting, that sort of organic kind of mentoring and kind of sharing of knowledge that kind of happens when everyone's kind of in an open plan space.
I've never heard organic eavesdropping, but that is a really great terminology and really important because people can learn so much just by how you hold yourself by looking up to people, how they hold themselves, how they talk, how they negotiate, all that stuff. And you learn actually so much from those people because you are influenced by them. You're working with them for a lot. Yeah,
of course.
And that is how you develop as a human, by reflecting other humans that you admire and you look up to.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
So bringing that kind of those two people together is organic eavesdropping.
I know, yeah. Yeah. I mean, you obviously, if you need to do something confidential or important, it's kind of good to make sure you've got a phone booth or a focus room or a little quiet room to work in. But otherwise it's just that organic kind of mentorship and learning that you get from a slightly more kind of open workspace.
Fantastic.
But interesting.
Right, I think we're done, unless you want me to add anything.
No, I don't think so. I think we're good.
Well, thank you very much, Angela. That's been really interesting hearing about how your experience with dealing with the location of a space and how that impacts the planet and the people and how that all brings together really to one design, because you've got such an interesting array of experience and from a consultancy and a design field, really interesting. So I hope that's people have picked up some tips, learned some things.
Some tips.
Thank
Bit of
you
organic
very much.
eavesdropping.
Yeah, thank you.